Welcome back to Mixed Up. I'm Emma.
And I'm Nicole.
And we're really excited to be here with you for this limited season of Mixed Up to celebrate the launch of the Half of It in paperback. Be sure to get your copy from all good bookstores. In this season, we're going to look at being misidentified as mixed people, maternal wellness and healing our wounds, and an expert who has their finger on the pulse gives us their take on beauty standards and how they've evolved over the years.
Today, we're speaking to Denise Devenish, a counsellor who works primarily with musicians, having grown up in a family steeped in the music industry. She's the daughter of Kishi Yamamoto and Adrian Sherwood of On You Sound fame, and she grew up around iconic artists like Lee Scratch Perry, Ari Up, and Bim Sherman.
We don't want to spoil too much, but as always, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode.
Thank you so much for joining us. I think we loved everything you had to say in your email. And I know particularly kind of describing yourself as someone who has grown up in a family of musicians, which sounded so brilliant to me. I was like, it's giving me Sound of Music vibes.
The Von Trapp family.
Von Trapp family.
Very different in my household.
The Osmonds. I should have thought of that. That should be my first thought, actually.
I loved that it was the Sound of Music. That's great.
That's a whole nother podcast, Nicole.
That is a whole other podcast. That's a whole other thing. But I would love if we could I guess we could kind of start from there, start from the beginning a bit of like about where you grew up and kind of like your family life and then where this work kind of started for you. Like, what's the origin story of, your work as a therapist raised amongst musicians?
Where does it start? I mean, my dad is a white man from High Wycombe, Buckinghamshire. He fell in love with black music really young. There was a soul club and he'd lost his father really young. And the man that took him on was a West Indian man. And he wasn't married to my nan, but he took him under his wing. He was always there for him to confide in. And he spent his time in that community as the kind of little white guy from 13, 14. And to cut a long story short, he loved it so much that he basically started making reggae, but got into the dub scene, which is a version of reggae, kind of more bass heavy. And he ended up working with the greats in dub, Lee Scratch Perry, spent a lot of time in Jamaica. And he kind of, as a white man, pioneered the dub form in this country. But I think a lot came with that, being a white skinhead guy playing heavy dub roots music and in his own journey. And then he met my mum. She went to interview him. She was running a magazine. She's Japanese. She comes from a tiny village in a place called Nanjo in the middle of nowhere in Japan. And she got the heck out of there because for her, Japan, I think for her it's too Japanese. She was very smart. She went to a top university. She was one of the only women studying there. And I think my family that from Japan were doctors. She just didn't feel she belonged to that. And she was looking for literature. She was looking for poetry. She was looking for art and music outside of Japan. And what was exciting her was coming from London and the UK. And she dropped out of uni. She's a rebel. She left. And before she met my dad, she traveled all around. She had the hippie bus.
Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with her.
Traveled everywhere on her own. And she was a photographer. And before she met my dad, she ran her own magazine in London. She'd interviewed some great, very famous musicians. Anyway, and then someone said, go and interview my dad, he's up to some interesting stuff. And they fell in love. And then they had me and we were living in East Ham and my dad ran a studio in the front room. And he was working off analog tape, and everything was really old school and cutting it up to make dub sounds. And there were so many artists in the house, Lee Scratch Perry. I mean, people from everywhere, not just Jamaican musicians. And we had lots of punk artists. And what started to happen there was kind of a political movement between, punk music and what was going on, kind of Thatcher. And then my dad was really merging dub and punk. And so I was in lots of spaces with black musicians and white musicians. And in the rave and in the dance, there was this meeting. And so that time the music's very political, and she plays piano, and she'd be there with him till 7 a.m, cutting up tape, and people would come in and out and have a drink or whatever, hang out, make music. And I remember being up and, watching it all. And it was very normal for me to be in color and be around people from everywhere. That was my vision. That was my feeling. That was my home.
Yeah.
And then basically there were only 2 schools that I could go to, and one was Christian and one was Asian. That was kind of the community there. And I went to the Christian school, and I came back and I said, you didn't make me, Jesus did.
Oh, wow.
And my mum and dad, not being religious, said, this isn't going to work, we're going to move. And they were doing quite well then, even though the music industry was very different then, making lots of money from the CD. And my dad became the kind of remix artist that big bands would go to. And so he got a place in Muswell Hill in North London, and, wanting to send me to these schools, which I'm in Muswell Hill now. And it's a very white, middle class area. My mum ran the record label, the studio stayed in the house. So it became a label and a studio, again, filled with people from everywhere. Great Indian musicians, African musicians, Jamaican musicians, Asian musicians, white musicians. It was a melting pot at my house. And I'd go to school, and then we'd have a play day. And I remember being picked up by, uncle and uncle, lots of men that were in the industry, and some very powerful women. And it'd be a Rasta coming to pick me up at, which was a very white middle class school, and everyone looking and being quite confused. And we stood out, and my dad stood out. And I remember thinking that and feeling that. But it's interesting what I've unraveled later, and very much in my journey in becoming a therapist. Because to cut a long story short, I sang on sound systems. I toured with Blur. I sang with Sinead O'Connor. I had amazing times. But the challenges in the industry and it being very male dominated, I couldn't keep up. And there were lots of drugs, and I got caught up a bit in that very young. And I basically had really bad anxiety and depression. So I had my own journey with my mental health, which led me to working with young people for 10 years, training as a therapist, and then setting up a unique service, which is my own practice for aligning myself with charities to support musicians, because I lost a lot of people I loved along the way. I saw a lot, the magic in the artists around me kind of fade and get used up and go somewhere, but I didn't understand it. So I think I was asking all these questions. I still am. But I knew that musicians needed help. And the idea that it's all glamorous really bothered me, because I've seen the other side, and I've seen how much work is involved and how much compromise it takes to tour for 6 months. My parents did split up after 13 years, which was really hard. Because then that split thing again, which I think we're going to talk about today, really did happen in my family, where we were all mixed, but together at least.
In other news, the Half of It paperback is out now. In celebration of the release of our dinky baby paperback book, perfectly sized for your handbag if I do say so, we have pulled together this very special limited series. If you still don't have your copy of our book, now's your chance. Nicole, give them a little reminder of what we cover in the Half of It.
In our book, The Half of It, we share interviews and storytelling from a wide range of diverse voices on their experiences of being mixed. We cover so many topics, from beauty to food to hair to stereotypes and mythology like the tragic mulatto trope.
But before we get back to the episode, we also want to say a big thank you to the incredible people
who we admire so much,
who said lovely things about our book, such as Hanako Footman, author of Mongrel, Ella Lee, author of Jaded, Miranda Kaufman, author of Black Tudors, Jasa Aluwalia, author of Both, Not Half, Dean Atta, author of Person Unlimited, Kathy Ray, author of How to Be Disabled and Proud. Massive thanks to all of you.
The Half of It, Exploring the Mixed Race Experience, is available from all good bookstores. You can find links in the show notes. And if by some chance you go into your local bookstore and it's not there, be sure to request it from the bookseller and they will order it in for you. This type of guerrilla activity really helps new authors and gets our books out onto the shelves.
I feel like you started to touch on it, but I guess I wanted to explore a little bit more why you felt so deeply that this space specifically needed your offering, why you needed to be in service to this space. And I think we have just started to see or hear some of the real truths about the experiences people in the music industry, musicians, singers, etc., have been going through, and that it's not isolated incidents here and there, that it's often this kind of reoccurring theme. I've got Ray in the front of my mind, because of course she's been particularly vocal, recently. We kind of have seen the story unfold. You can look back and see, okay, right, I actually see that. And we can trace it back. But yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more about, why you feel that, you need to be in service to this space specifically.
I mean, you'll understand this. You've written a book, and I heard your podcast a couple of times, and I just thought, wow, all the, my life's been mixed up. It's been really mixed up. I'm messed up and, beautiful. And I think the music industry is so mixed up and so messed up and so beautiful. And I didn't realize how mixed up I was about being mixed up until I did my psychotherapy training when I was 31. And so I felt I wanted to come here in two parts to be brave and bring my story, which I think is really important for my work. Firstly, the world of psychotherapy has been predominantly very white middle class, and there's a massive problem with that in terms of helping people. And the course that I did is one of the only courses under the BACP, which is the governing body in this country for psychotherapy and counselling, that looked into cultural competence and diversity in the clinical space. This is shocking.
That's really surprising.
It's one of the only ones. And I remember it's really hard to speak about this because when I'm speaking about then, I didn't know what I do now. But I remember, Black friends of our family not wanting to go into therapy because they were afraid that at worst that they were going to be kind of sent away and not.
Which was a valid fear. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think sometimes people think that that's kind of some kind of
like an irrational fear.
An irrational fear that's been enlarged or made up somehow. No, not at all. And I bring it back on a less heavier level, but if somebody who's Black, mixed, other, is going into a space with a white middle class therapist who hasn't done the work on what it is to sit with difference or hasn't accepted their own biases and judgments, they're going to block their client. They're going to stop their client from bringing their story fully. And at worst, they're going to make it worse. They could cause even more problems and suffering for the individual. So for me, I very much want to speak wherever I can about the importance of having cultural competence as a psychotherapist and a counsellor, meaning have you been able to name your own prejudice and judgments? Have you been able to look at what you represent in the space? Have you been able to identify yourself as an oppressor if that's what your skin represents? This is heavy, but this is what I believe. And I think once we can do that, once we are willing and brave, this is for me what therapy is all about entirely. As a therapist, to name, explore, and look at our experience, to name and look at our discomfort with who we are, with how confused we've been, with our judgments. If we can name it, then we're free from the denial and the way in which that blocks us from really truly living and being with people. It's a very sad thing if you limit yourself to just one group of people through pure ignorance. And if you're a therapist, then you're saying, I want to help people. So therefore, help people.
Yeah.
And do it properly. Do the work. So that's partly why I'm here. I think on my course, the mixed thing, just it's like on the day they said, okay, we're going to begin the cultural competence module. I had a white and a Black tutor from very different backgrounds. They said, we're going to begin it on Monday. None of us knew what to expect. We all came in, some with our coffees, waking up. They said, right, the Black people over there, the white people over there, and the mixed people go over there. So I just went to my group, and then already the pain begun.
Already the pain begun. I feel stressed. I wasn't even involved. I'm stressed. I want to know what happened.
The pain begun because I'm going to be very honest, this is where even my own judgments within 3 seconds came up, because I saw some mixed people go to the black group, right?
Right.
And in my head, I thought, but you're mixed. Oh, this is where it begun. It will never be something that, going through that, we went through that for 9 months.
I wonder where I would go. Nicole, where would you go? I literally just thought to myself, instinctually, I think in the past, I would have gone to the black group. But like right now, if someone posed that question to me now, I would have gone to the mixed group.
So interesting. I think it would depend on what day you caught me on and my assessment of the environment and like how I wanted to advocate that day, or for both others and myself.
Yeah, the assessment of the environment for sure. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm not black.
So you didn't even have that. There wasn't an Asian group.
There were no. So listen. So in my group, the Turkish girl, the 2 Turkish girls, the Chinese girl, me, and then the 2 other Arabic women. We basically, and then a few mixed black white people came in the group, right? And we all stood there, and that's how it began. And it wasn't even 9 o'clock.
You hadn't even finished your coffee, and you already had whiplash.
Then we hadn't even finished the coffee. Yeah. And okay, well, we're in it. And the funny thing is, we've always been in it to some degree, but we've never been forced to look at it like that. And when I tell you, we observed wars. We observed people screaming in a tiny room, no windows, and they deliberately did that.
Yeah.
And the mixed group was silent. And
oh my gosh, this is so telling.
It was so, and I didn't notice it until my tutor goes, she's proper Cockney. She goes, Denise, this one day out of nowhere, because I'd just been listening for about 45 minutes while people were arguing in the black and the white group, and it was very painful, very, very painful, very tense. And I thought, there's so much I wanted to say, and I thought, shut your mouth, don't say anything. You've got no right to say anything. You don't understand any of this. Don't understand either side. Just be quiet, be quiet. Whereas up until that point in my course, I was very vocal, to the point where sometimes my tutor had to say, hold back. Can you hold space? Can you listen? Can you sit? So I was very much practicing that. But at that point, I hadn't said anything for weeks. And my tutor went, oh, Denise, you haven't got anything to say. You haven't opened your trap for about 3 weeks. We used to hearing a lot of this, how she'd go, that's how she'd work. She's always, they're very much pushing you. And I said, I remembered it was choked.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know what to say. And she goes, this is the problem. All the mixed group, you haven't been able to speak. She named it for all of us. You're stuck. This is the experience. You don't know where you can speak, who you can speak for, where you belong. And it was the first time ever I'd always felt, I thought I'd been telling myself, oh, you haven't got a right to feel different, because I have black friends and they were suffering, and I saw it. I saw it when we were out and how my black female friends were treated. I've seen all of that, and the light of the skin that you wear, the easier the treatment you got. I'm just going to say it. I don't know how, maybe I've got to use different language, but I'm from North London. I grew up the way I did. We described each other the way we did. I don't mean to be offensive. So please, if I use something that's, if my language is wrong, tell me, because sometimes I go back to a place and then I'm not considerate enough if I'm saying something in a way that's PC or correct. But that's how I saw it. And I thought, you can't say anything. I'm light skinned. I'm all right. Why are you getting upset? I always thought that. And, Japanese people out of all of Asia, they done all right, really. This is what I would tell myself growing up all the time. Don't get angry. Who are you getting angry for? Be quiet. And all of that came up. And, but I'd speak on behalf of my friends who are black, or speak on behalf of my friends I remember my Chinese friend being, ridiculously cussed out. But I was too. I remember people saying stuff about, do you eat noodles and egg fried rice? And I just kind of laugh it off and doing this all the time, Chinese, Japanese. And
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it was always just kind of, funny, because I've seen you just deny it.
Just minimized.
Kind of funny, everyone's doing it. But I remember being embarrassed and sort of holding my stomach, all that stuff. So anyway, in the classroom, it just went, and everything came at once. And I remember seeing my dad in rooms full of black people being called a wigger and being spat on. And I remember singing on a stage and being booed off when we were in Wolverhampton with the Blair crowd. And the first time I ever sung live, and just, I'm never going to sing in front of people again. I remember, and everything was choking me. And she was like, speak, you've got something to say. And I was like,
got nothing to say.
And I just burst into tears. Then I felt terrible for taking up space. So it's all happening in this moment. And I was studying in Devon, and I'd said something about, I did my degree in Devon, and I remember being in my course, and we were doing a topic. It was whether the Arts Council did offer money exclusively for black artists or not. And everyone in my group was white, actually, apart from me. We were a small group studying at an arts university doing arts and culture management. And we'd been together for 2 years. We'd gone out drinking together. We'd hung out. They were mates. And they were getting all very heated this time. I'm going to bring this back because I raised it in my course. One of the girls said, I'm not racist, because somebody said you're being racist. Denise is my friend and she's black. Yeah. And I remember thinking, and I didn't say anything for a while. And I remember looking around the room and I realized, do you feel if you think I've got some black in me, or you think because my dad's a dub producer and I put on a gig here and I brought Squid, who's a Rasta, to MC of my dad, so you just assumed he was my dad? But we'd known each other for 2 years and nobody said anything until about 50 minutes in, and I said, hey, I'm not black. So I raised this.
That must have been awkward.
It's awkward. In my course, and I said something about whiteness and privilege, and a girl in my group who I was training in my psychotherapy training, doing this culture competence module, she's like, you really upset me. She's from Devon, she's white, she got really angry with me. And there was just all this stuff just hitting. I cannot explain it, for 9 months like that. So every time you were having a breakthrough, or you were trying to get in contact with something, you also realized it was very hard to know how to claim the space, to honor it, and to move through it. And I'm still finding that. I don't think that's over. That's another reason why I wanted to be here. So, to kind of highlight the importance of having cultural competence as a therapist, and recognizing that doesn't end. You don't go, oh, and I have cultural competence, tick. It is a constant unraveling
and unlearning
and willingness to sit with your feelings and your experience, and to name the difference in the space. And if ever I say the same thing to my clients, I'm wondering what it's like to sit in front of me. I'm curious, are you wondering how old I am? I'm curious if you're wondering where I'm from, what my heritage is. I'm wondering if you as a black woman think I can hold you. I say it because if I'm going to avoid saying it and I'm just going to lean into all my study of the mind, what's that going to do it with this human work? I'm choosing to work with human beings. Our mixed upness is always there.
I'm blown away.
We're Good Form, and we help tell stories that move people. Like this podcast, for example.
Good Form is a purpose-driven marketing consultancy and production house, and our speciality is building community and culture.
We create podcasts, including this one, content, full-scale campaigns, social media strategies, events, and brand experiences. We help brands get clear on how they show up in the world and create creative that gets them seen by the right people.
Whether it's a top-rated podcast or an award-winning campaign, we know what it takes to make bingeable content and build community.
So if you've got an idea for a podcast the world needs to hear, or if your brand needs more main character energy on social media, get in touch. Find us at www.ongoodform.com. I mean, thank you for sharing that with us. I found that absolutely fascinating. I'm kind of like, I'm blown away, but I'm in the room. I want more. I want to know what happened next.
I'm so locked in by that whole experience because, I was like, obviously it's given me so much to think about. It's made me have flashbacks to many different points in my life. So I can imagine what it must have felt like to actually have to experience that.
Yeah, it's a lot. It was a lot. It was great though. It was wonderful. Like, again, I want to be there. But at the time, I think I dissociated a lot, so that the memories are quite, and witnessing full blown rows between the groups and us being silent. I still remember that and realizing none of us are saying anything, and it's been 45 minutes and they're screaming, they're crying, and the white group being very defensive, very, very defensive and awkward. It was very awkward.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've just watched a play. Genuinely, it's incredible. But it really highlights how far there is to go. Like you were saying, it's almost like this constant questioning. And I think this is what we found with the podcast and with the book, and with speaking to so many people. There's so many assumptions. I'll pick up on just something you said, which was about colorism. And I think, we all have these assumptions of experiences, and it was only when we started speaking to people who, are light-skinned and have had these experiences that are directly related to them being light-skinned and then being associated with, being attractive, quote unquote, promiscuous, all of these things that also come with that idea of light-skinnedness, of mixed raceness, and the horrific experiences that they've had and abuse that they've suffered and trauma that they've been through because of that, and the importance of context all the time. And that's why, that idea that you've just spoken to us about, like how it's never over and there are always more questions. And that is how you, I suppose, hold counsel with somebody in an effective manner, not just today, but tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and whomever that person may be.
And with yourself. Because like you said, you end up in a new situation, and you're presented with another moment where you can leave yourself or you can stay close to yourself. And I'll own it, I can be okay with my mixed upness, and that I don't fit in anywhere really, and that everybody's always figuring out, where are you from, what do you do, but not, and I get it, and it's nice, but it's coming from a place of, you don't really look like, I get that a lot at the school when I drop my kids off. I mean, maybe I'm projecting too, so I'm really trying to not get caught up in the external, assuming what other people are thinking of me, because when I do that, I get defensive and then I feel angry. And then before I know it, I've disconnected myself from the potential of having a new mum friend, or from having an experience where I belong as a mother in that school. But I'm definitely still working through that. I'm just going to go and be really proud of who I am. And I'm going to dress in a way that presents me. I've even had ex-boyfriends say, when I met you, I just thought you were cute and Asian, and you're actually really loud and obnoxious, because they assumed I'm very short, I have this kind of cute cheeks, and I look more Asian now, obviously, than I did before. I used to get a lot of South American. People always thought I was South American. Or people thought, if you've got a bit of black in you, I always had that a lot because of my attitude, they'd say. I was like, where's all these ideas coming from?
But also because of your cultural upbringing, those things come out in the things that we like and the things that we talk about, and what we know culturally.
Yeah.
Gosh, I see that all the time on TikTok.
No, TikTok's.
I see it all the time because what it's done is obviously opened up a world of people to people that you don't necessarily have access to all the time. Obviously, having lived in London for 13 years, I've seen all sorts of people, many different accents, many different styles, like so I'm unfazed, but I can see the Americans, I can see the Canadian, I can see people just being like, I don't understand why this person is speaking in this way, or why do they sound this way? And doing that kind of questioning, just like very openly. People are so open with it, of course, in the comments. But yeah, I can see where people would project that onto you to think that you're Black because of...
Yeah, no, and that's such an important point. Or Black, yeah, and maybe because of my accent, or, you know, I never used patois.
Yeah, and what they associate.
Right, well, they associate that with, but my brother speaks, he's a kind of urban, I think they describe it, or it's this kind of assumption. They look at you and it's like, I can't place you.
Yeah.
And so I mustn't do that to myself, which is what I'm getting at. It's like, can I? And like you're saying, yes, people I loved and observed and spent day in, day out with were Black, you know, so maybe I have picked up some mannerisms, and I have a soul and a spirit that gathers all the people I loved and I dwelled on and I looked up to and live within me, whether they're gone or they're older now and they're not the versions of themselves they were in youth, and they don't play like that. You know, everything's moving all the time. Everything is changing all the time. I don't need to explain myself to anybody, but I want to be open and not in that. I don't want to be defensive. And I think I spent so long being angry, and I didn't understand my anger, and I was premeditating. I was preempting. People would come at me with judgments. I still go through that, and I exceed that, and I am at best when I'm loving to myself and everybody in my space. And I realize that I fit in anywhere because it's in here. I'm at peace then in here and here. And if I have to shapeshift into a mode where I have to address something professionally, then I can take that on. But in my everyday, I want peace. And I want that my children see me at peace. And yes, they're growing up in a very white middle class area. And I've got my eye on what that can do. But I don't want to judge white middle class people. I don't want to judge anybody. And there's beauty all around and gifts from all humans. So I just want to get in touch with that. And it's been a really tricky ride. And I hadn't realized until my 30s, I'm almost 40 now, but it's crazy that I hadn't really realized how mixed up I was about being mixed, you know, and that's why I love what you do and what you offer, you know, in the space for people to just talk about that, because I don't think that's been apparent in my life much. And my accent can flip and turn too, depending on where I dwell, and that's okay. I'm not pretending anything.
Yeah.
It just is how I present.
It's how you work in your world. And that's true for so many of us, I think. And well, I know because I've spoken to so many people now. And I think, you know, you're not alone in not finding anywhere to talk or to hear these conversations. I think we've all kind of grown up without them. And that is also part of that, you know, why we recognize that silence in the group, because nobody asked us. So there's no license to talk in some ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important visual or like visceral representation of that.
And like what stood out to me about that experience as well in the room was also this idea that like there are moments where we feel like we must sit in the middle. And again, whether that's projection from other people or things that we've picked up along the way, because I know for me growing up, there were definitely times where I felt like, oh, I'm supposed to almost be this, like a representation of this neutrality. So I can recognize that feeling, or that's what came up for me hearing that story.
That's a very powerful. That's a very important point, because I think in being in between different worlds, you observe them all, and then you're in this very unique space where you empathize and love two sides that have fought. And so therefore you have a greater responsibility, or you feel you do, to love and take care of both parts, or all those parts. And that's a lot to hold. And I remember then towards the end of the course, we all had to hold up our flags. And that was really weird too. And I just thought, I'm a North London girl. To be honest, I don't speak Japanese. I think yeah. And, my mum never spoke Japanese to us. I've tried, I really struggle. I'm also neurospicy, so it's the intersectionality there with the diversity of my brain too, which I found out only after I had my daughter, which was always obvious. And because my Japanese family are basically, you know, I don't know them. We've only really sat in silence. They live, my granddad's gone now. My auntie's still there. She never got married. They tried to marry her off to doctors, didn't really work. So she's kind of been kept. But they're wealthy, but we won't see any of that wealth because my mum left. So that's fine. But there's definitely lots of parts there that I can feel in silence that my mum will never talk about. So when I go there, I'm a gaijin, which literally translates false Japanese person. So I attempt to not be just a tourist, very excited by the food and, all the other parts that we all love about Japan. Japan fascinates everybody, but I feel like, no, surely it belongs to me differently to you. That used to make me cross as well. And people would say, oh, Japan's just so amazing. They'd start talking to me and they'd be saying things I didn't know about and I'd pretend, oh, yeah. I'd never watched a manga. Then I developed my own opinions and they keep changing. And the mad thing is I'm falling more and more in love with Japan, and it hurts me because I had all these ideas that I think I took on because mum left. So I felt angry for her. That's the holding again. And I felt angry for dad not belonging in his white estate community, but not in the black either. And then, but wait a minute. Can I just have a channel? Can I just have a connection? And can I ever figure out what that is without the ideas of other people coming into my head? Because there is me in Japan, as much as there is me and my nan in the estate in Wickham, as much as there is me in North London, as much as there is. And then somebody said, do you want to hold another flag, Denise? Meaning, do I want to hold a Jamaican flag? I know she meant that, Juanita. Bless her. And it really, I said, no. I was so embarrassed that I remember thinking, I couldn't do that. All the black group would look at me thinking, why are you holding that up? And, who we come to call family, it's not always blood, like you said. It's the epigenetics. It's the things we learn around us. It's those who we loved and looked to and they become us. Does that mean I want to hold a Jamaican flag? No, because what the Jamaican people have gone through is so the opposite of my privilege that it's not right. And I feel, I couldn't hold it up and I was very embarrassed, but it just that whole part and how it unravels, it doesn't sit and just go, okay, done. Now move on. It just goes on and on and on, but not in bad ways. It's so wonderful because it's so complicated. And, I've realized that I can, when I was in Japan this time, I took my family who are white, my children they have blonde hair and blue eyes. And, we were there for a month and we spent most of it in the countryside just because we loved it there, and we're going to go back. But yeah, this time I just thought I can take parts for me and I don't need to tell anyone. I can see where I'm Japanese. And I think the anger was my defense because of how I couldn't fit in anywhere. So I developed a very tough character. No one's going to mess with me. And that's also the kind of battle, I think, for women anyway, and in the industry. I was trying to find my place in sound systems. My voice is very tender. I sing very gently, and that's my power. But I was trying to keep up with all the tough women who are on sound systems. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And I think there's that same thing. It's like, I can take what I want and I can make it my own in whichever way I please, in honoring all those multiple parts. I honor you all, but I am me. And in my mixed upness, I have to honor my expression and my interpretation of all those parts and how that will proceed ongoingly.
That's a beautiful expression, that you have to honor your own interpretation of all of those parts. I think that's a beautiful way of expressing it.
Yeah.
I want to touch on, because I feel like you've led us neatly here anyway. You're really good at this. Have you done this before? But I feel like we started to touch on something that comes up a lot for us in regards to this podcast and people, and the book as well that we've written. People will mention this kind of performativity that they're accused of, and appropriation versus appreciation. So I kind of wanted to ask you about your take on that, and also professionally how you talk to your clients about that kind of thing, because I'm sure that it comes up, especially when you're working with creatives and musicians and artists, because so much of our influences come from very mixed sources and from things that maybe culturally we don't feel like we can hold up a flag for necessarily.
I've done a lot of work with people around their identity, and I'm a humanistic, person-centered counsellor, which basically means there's lots of different trainings and modalities, and people really should know this before they choose their counsellor, and because the philosophy of the therapist will totally determine your experience in the therapy room. And what that means is I'm not there offering my analysis and my expertise. My role is to sit so congruently in the space, meaning so honestly, which is why I was explaining the way I was trained is you're going to have to bring all your stuff, Denise, so that when somebody says something, like you said, that brings up a memory, I don't leave them, but I go, okay, I can feel this while I'm still listening. You're kind of working in different ways, move it to the side. So my role is to try and get in touch with their authenticity, their truth, what they really feel about themselves, what they want to say. So within the mixed upness of all, if I can reflect back to them what I'm seeing, if that is, it looks like you're conflicted, it looks like you're acting, or you want to be this way, but you're not saying that, or you feel trapped here. This is what I do a lot. How does that feel? I'm curious. I'm curious because earlier you said this about who you are, but now you're shrinking and your body's done this. Are you hiding? Is there shame here? So I'm very gently and with great love and empathy, congruence and non-judgment. I have to hold those and embody those conditions. I'm listening to all, as my chief said, all the music behind the words. I am watching what's going on and feeling at the appropriate moment when I can show them that disconnect.
Yeah.
And gently ask, why aren't you allowing yourself to be the way you want to be? Because ultimately in therapy, we're trying to get so in touch with the internal locus of evaluation, they call it. So we're getting away from the external locus. We're living from here. I do recognize that, that pain and that embarrassment when you feel like you're acting a part, but you don't belong there, but you really want to belong to it, or you're dancing a certain way to music that comes from your, but should you be? Or I've seen it throughout my whole life. Can I in Japan sit and say and do this in between each meal? Can I bow, or should I be the tourist and not? All that. What? How far can we take this? Can I not just be so in my body that I will do what I will in the moment and I will answer to myself?
Yeah.
That kind of freedom, I remember Nina Simone in an interview speaking about fear, and it just very powerful. And, I could see, that documentary about her is one of the heaviest things I've ever seen in my life. I'm a massive Nina Simone fan. But, she says, to live without fear, and she stops, she said, can you imagine? And you can really see her processing that. And I think the fear of not being accepted and the fear of not being loved just as you are is just too much to bear. And I think in therapy, I like to believe I help. That's my journey, is to help people get in touch with the difference and the mixed upness and the contradictions and the conflict and the shame and the pride and the joy, and just let it all be there. We can just all be here, just breathing, pulsing, moving. And that's you, and you're just holding it. You can put it down when you want. You can embrace it when you want. You decide. it's this permission, isn't it, that we need from outside, but actually it has to come from here. And it's a lifelong journey.
Thank you so much, as always, for listening. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel by searching Mixed Up. There you'll be able to see all of our video interviews with our incredible guests. You can also find a link in the show notes. Please do leave us a rating and review, as it really helps us independent podcasters.